Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Shannon, and I'm a psychic medium, and I'm your host. Because I'm traveling, for those of you that are actually watching and not listening, I'm going to be holding my microphone like I'm Ed McMahon with the Publishers Clearinghouse because I don't have my mic stand with me. So just don't mind this little thing sticking up. Today, my guest is Bri Lafferty. And after a near death experience in 2017, Brianna, do you say Brianna or Brianna?
Brianna.
That's how I say it. Brianna Lafferty is now an award winning author, international speaker, and a passionate death and spiritual doula. After unlocking the keys to healing, Bri now assists others in healing, grieving, and transitioning out of life with grace and peace. Thank you so much for joining me today, Bri.
Thank you for having me on.
I am so happy to have you here. So, first, I'm going to start out by asking you about your work because you and I spoke before, and I am so interested myself in investigating a career of death doula. And I know now you're a spiritual doula. So, I want to know, tell me in your words what it is that you actually do and how you help people.
Yes, I would love to. So, I wanted to start with defining a doula a lot of people don't understand or haven't heard that term or aren't familiar with it. So, a doula is basically a non medical support person. And some people are familiar with birth doulas helping transition lives into the world via birth midwifery. A few more people are familiar with the death doula concept, helping transition lives out of the world, um, much like a spiritual uh, umbilical cord, transitioning this life into the next. And that's where I really got started after my near death experience. And it transitioned into also becoming a spiritual doula, which then helps people birth into their authentic selves and break free from chronic illness, is really where my specialty lies.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that I have a real curiosity about what it is you do. So I'd love to hear how you got started in that field. Because you yourself were a chronic illness sufferer. So start wherever you feel comfortable. What has your journey been like?
Yes, thank you. Everything started in a crazy conjunction of craziness in when I was 10. I started experiencing paranormal activity. I started experiencing uh, symptoms of what would later be diagnosed as a rare chronic neurological movement disorder. I also started having metaphysical abilities, spiritual gifts, and all around the time of puberty. So, as you know, puberty is hard enough as, going through it as a child. You already feel all out of sorts about your body and out of wits and confused and hormonal. Then you throw on some crazy spiritual activity and some crazy um, physical phenomenons. And I was just in a world of unknown. And it wasn't the fun unknown. I love adventure and I love exploring the unknown, but this one was a really rough ride. So, throughout my early teenage years, prepubescent years, I struggled with the onset of myoclonus dystonia. And once again, that is a neurological movement disorder. And that included, at first, just a lot of muscle rigidity. And then it grew into involuntary muscle movements, twitching. So, already a child starting to get acne and my body is changing. And now my body is doing weird things without my knowledge. By the time I was 15, I had quite a bit of nerve pain and I started beginning to tremor, much like a Parkinson's patients. They thought I might have MS. They thought I might have a brain tumor. Gosh, everything was ruled out. And I also was a chronic insomniac. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, my dreams were fueled with nightmares. So it was a very rough start to my life. And things kind of hit ahead both in the spiritual world and in the chronic illness world. I was trying to run from it all. I moved 1,400 miles away from my home, my family, and everything to try to get away from myself. And as I'm not sure if how many of you know this, but you cannot run from yourself and you cannot run from your soul. So it did not work. And my illness just continued on. I finally got diagnosed at 18. I ran away from myself, tried to run away from myself when I was 26. And my symptoms were not able to be controlled. It's a rare illness. They hadn't done much research. We already tried all the medications. And I was astral traveling involuntarily. And just everything was so scary and overwhelming. And the night of April 27th, 2017, I couldn't do it anymore. We had tried more therapies, and my illness was now toppled with flu-like symptoms, which was toppled with spiritual attacks and paranormal attacks, and I just gave up. I couldn't do it anymore. We had tried holistic medicine, spiritual medicines, Chinese medicine, conventional medicine. There was nothing. There was nothing left for me. So I surrendered with absolutely every part of my being, which is different from when I was a kid. I'd cry out and I was angry and I'd beg God to, free me from this pain and this torment. But this time was different. This time I called out with my soul. And that is what led to my near death experience. When I surrendered completely, my body and my soul detached, and I ended up in my NDE experience.
Wow, that's so much intensity all at once, and you're right. I mean, I can tell you 6th grade was the worst year of my life. I mean, that kind of middle school time or that coming of age is just I don't know what's worse, middle school, high school, it's all bad. At least for me, it was anyway. Um, thank you so much for sharing that. Did you at that time, I assume that you knew, did you understand that it was a paranormal or a spiritual experience that you were having when it first began? Was your family knowledgeable about that sort of thing?
Yeah, and all this does lead into why I'm a spiritual and death doula. But when it was going on, I was in the Christian church, and they said if you are saved, you would have none of these experiences. And if you did have these metaphysical experiences, then you were practicing devil worship. And so I wasn't, but I was still having these experiences. And I had given my soul to Jesus Christ, and I thought I'd be saved from paranormal activity, and I wasn't. So I was very confused in the religion. And my mom had luckily been introduced to some metaphysical principles and some other spiritual principles. So she would go on the back end and, like not up front and personal in front of the church or my family or anything, but she would do more research. And so she would tell me that these are gifts, they're not curses, that it's actually beautiful, that I'm more in tune with God, and that it's not of the devil. She looked more into the paranormal stuff for me. I mean, she was just a mama bear, and she did all the research to figure out how to try to help me. Same with my illness, she was always researching. But I wasn't I kind of was aware that I had these metaphysical gifts, and I was aware that there was a spirit world, and this world just beyond the veil right in front of our eyes. And we're so close we could reach out and peek behind it at any time. So I kind of felt like I don't know if you've ever seen Harry Potter, but 10 years old and Harry Potter is a huge thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I could be a wizard. And Jesus said, you can do all this and more. So I was like, well, why can't I do all this and more? So I always the start of this paranormal and metaphysical activity really gave me insight into what lays just beyond the veil, even though my church and my culture didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, that bless your mom because that's tough. A lot of religious people, it's so funny because to me, I think that it's all entwined. It's all the same thing. Religion comes from some idea of this other world you talk about. It's just that it's sort of more regimented or put into a box so we can make sense of it. But it's a lot, it's funny that as a medium, I know a lot of Christians are really against mediumship because it goes against what they think it goes against God, whereas I see it as it's going with God. So I'm that's wonderful of your mother to be so open-minded. All right, so now we'll talk about your near-death experience and what happened that day.
Yeah. So when I surrendered, And in the time, I was having major flu-like symptoms, spiritual attacks from dark entities. I was obviously under attack with my dystonia. My body was attacking itself. Um, I felt alone and hopeless, and I just crawled out and said, "I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands." Who I was calling out to, I wasn't quite sure because God had never answered me before. So as soon as I surrendered and I thought that statement, I felt this huge wave of peace and serenity overcome me for the first time in probably my life. And there was silence and peace and tranquility like I'd never imagined. And I was so elated that this something happened. I felt like it almost being pulled off of me, all this hurt and all this anguish pulled off of me. And I felt tapping in the palms of my hands and my feet, and then I heard this big booming voice, and it was not external, it wasn't internal, it was just ever present. And it asked, "Are you ready?" I didn't even hesitate to say yes. Something answered my prayer. I wasn't going to ask what I was ready for. I just instantly thought yes. And as soon as I thought yes, I was detached from my body and I was with the God that saved me. I was with the creator, the source, the universe, the everything. And it was pure energy and pure love. Um, and I knew I was home. And I didn't realize that I had left my body. I didn't realize I had ever been attached to a body. Was not really aware of Earth, but somehow consciously I knew that I was dead. And when I thought, "Am I dead?" Three monks appear and kind of just give me a laughing grin, as if to say, "If you only knew." And it would take me 5 years later after my experience to find out that they were kind of laughing because death doesn't exist. Death is not a thing. Death is a transition. There is no such thing as being dead. So at the time, I was just like, "What does that mean?" But I've since figured that one out. And that was the first part of my experience. That was just so amazing and so loving and warm and everything. And to be back there is the best soul hug that you could ever more than you can imagine.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And do you can I think you do describe it as a near-death experience. Do you think it's more of a near-death experience, or is it just an out-of-body experience? What you because you had left your body before, you'd been astral traveling since you were a kid. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have astral traveled. I have had an out of body experience in a 4-day coma, and this one I knew I was dead several times throughout my experience, which is weird because I didn't even know of this humanity or this earthly form. So to know inherently know I was dead was a huge sign for me. That and feeling my heart start again, like start up again when I
Right.
entered my body and being absolutely terrified that I would be buried underground because of the sense of knowing that I had died. I struggled with that for a long time. Like, oh, was this out of body? Was this another astro travel? Was this a hallucination? What happened? But looking back, I can confidently say my body had ceased to provide life for 8 minutes.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Did you pop right back into your body after that? I know that time doesn't exist on the other side, and so it's that it was 8 minutes, but what did it feel like in terms of time?
Yeah, so the Black Void where I met the creator and these monks was only a short part of my experience. I also went through an amazing blue tunnel filled with ones and zeros and binary code, and my soul was being downloaded with information. And I end up in another room where I realized that the universe is created in math, and I need an ascended teacher. I never see the teacher, but I know it's a great teacher of history. And then I end up with other beings and other souls. I don't know if they're ever human or not, but I was playing and experimenting and curious with these other souls. And there is no speaking or talking, but we communicated as one. We moved as one.
Telepathy.
Except for I think it was even faster than telepathy, because you think of telepathy as having a thought, it's sending, someone receiving it,
Mhm.
responding to that thought and coming back and you reading it. Where this, I would have a thought and it would instantly happen. So, and like at one point I was a snowman and there was some beings working on a machine with a flame and I just had the thought, what happens if I get too close? Will I melt? Instantly, I am under the flame and melted and a puddle of eyeballs. And I think, I wonder if they'll put me back together. Instantly, they put me back together. So it was like once again, there's no time. So, that period of time you would take here on Earth to have that telepathy just maybe didn't exist because there's no such thing as time. And I never heard any other voices. We just, but we stocked shelves in this grocery store like area. We danced together as if we had choreographed for millennia and not a word was ever spoken. So it was a beautiful example of unity and oneness. I also, the last place in my experience as these beings are going through a barbed wire fence that I can't see beyond. And I just knew I couldn't go with them. I didn't have a choice. I just knew I couldn't go where they were going. I end up with a scroll unrolled in front of me and script, beautiful golden script starting to appear on the scroll. And I just know it is of such great, significant importance, and my ego comes back into the picture. I've been gone the whole experience, and my ego comes back and says, "Ha, you're showing this to a human." And just like that, the scroll rolls up, and I'm snapped back into my body. Without any words, any questions, anything. I'm just back, and that's when I feel my heart start again, and I'm positive I had been absent from this place for months. And that's why I was like, oh my gosh, this is how they accidentally bury people. My family did not um, follow my wishes to be cremated and they buried me. They were in such heartbreak that they couldn't bear to have me cremated. Just things were going through my panicked brain. I was so scared to open my eyes. I tried deep breathing. I tried meditating, self hypnosis, crying out again to get back to where I was before opening my eyes and having to figure out how to crawl myself out of a casket and 6 feet underground, and tell people, oh my gosh, I'm alive and this is how people get buried alive. And just the chaos that entered my mind when I re-entered my body was quite profound.
Yeah, that must be pretty jarring. A lot of people think, "Oh, I would love to have a near-death experience," but a lot of people, most people, I would say, do not recommend, um, even though it's changes their lives in many beautiful ways. So I'll kind of take it from, okay, you've this jarring re-entrance, but then, like, for the next, I don't know, period of time, weeks, months, how are you feeling? Was it hard to be back? How did it change your perception of the world? Even though you already had this understanding, this sounds like it was more in your face, really profound.
Yes, thank you so much for asking. I get that all the time. Oh, if I only had an NDE. Oh, if, my problems would be solved, or oh, I'd get some answers, and oh, it'd be easier to have an NDE. No. 10 out of 10 do not recommend. Um, while it did change me in a huge way, it's because I needed to be changed in a huge way. I would not listen to the universe. I would not listen to the signs or my soul path or my life's purpose. And so the universe, hit me over the head. And then it shoved me down some stairs. And then it threw me off a cliff. And then it threw me off a cliff into a bunch of thorn bushes. And then, like, I still wouldn't listen. So the universe had to try take drastic measures to get me to pay attention. And I still didn't pay attention after. Um, when I came back, I was in a whole new survival mode. So I'd been in survival mode up leading up to my near death experience because of my illness and the paranormal activity, and dark entities that I was surrounded with and impeded with. So I was in survival mode for at least 16 years, if not my whole life, leading up to this. But when I came back, I had unlocked a ton of metaphysical abilities beyond seeing auras and astral traveling. I unlocked medical intuition. I could feel where people were hurt and what was wrong. If you have arthritis in your knee, I could tell you which knee. I could If we drove past an accident, I could tell you if they had whiplash, seatbelt burn, deceased, an injury, a broken something. So that was very overwhelming. Especially the world's always hurting, and I didn't know how to separate that from myself. So I was just constantly feeling other people's pains, and I was able to hear their thoughts. So I'm not sure. I guess kind of telepathy. I couldn't communicate to them, but I could hear other people's thoughts very clearly. Um, and that was overwhelming. And it was kind of cool until I was in an Applebee's with my mom, and I heard this guy's thoughts, and it was so hateful. And it was stemmed from childhood, the culture of raising this hatred within that person. And it was a cultural thing. And so I understood where it came from, but to actually feel those emotions of, so it was racism. And my parents were phenomenal that they raised me that every person is just a skin suit. Every person is the same on the inside. Every soul is just energy. So it was really hard and devastating for me to hear this racist thought and feel how it had come up throughout the cultures. And it was overwhelming. And I was overwhelmed. Walls freaked me out. They were solid. I felt like I had just been this beautiful giant energy body in all sorts of bodies shoved back into the sausage casing of a human body. And I did not handle it. My mom even, bless her heart, she even tried to get me some counseling from other NDErs to integrate back into this life. And I wasn't sure if that was before or after I took drastic measures and tried to get back there, if you know what I mean. Um,
Yes.
it didn't work. That's what landed me in a 4-day coma, though.
So and this was after.
This was after. It
Okay.
was so
Yeah.
traumatic that, I tried to take my own life to get back in
Yeah.
this space. I had gone from a hellish earth, a hellish experience, I call it hell on earth, to this wonderful place. I wouldn't consider it heaven. I've heard other stories of more heaven-like places, but it was great. It
Mhm.
was no fear, no pain, no judgment, just curiosity, joy, love. And when I get back here and I hear these hateful thoughts and I feel this pain and I don't know who I am, and the world is so much, it's not any less confusing. It's just confusing on a whole nother realm. So within the first 6 months, I tried to take my own life to get back there unsuccessfully, which I was super pissed about when I woke
Mhm.
up. Um, I was not happy, but I realized I guess I'm here for a reason. I didn't get a stay during my experience. I didn't get to go anywhere. I didn't even get to enjoy the NDE again. I had an out of body where I saw myself hooked up to tubes, but I didn't have fun. And then I
Right.
took another 6 months of physical rehab to get back to a working human body. And after that, I just wanted to be close to that place again. So I volunteered for hospice.
That's the beginning of a new chapter for you.
That
I
was the
also
beginning.
Yeah, and I also wanna know, how was the dystonia during this time?
Yeah, I love that you asked because I was so immersed and confused about this new world. I hadn't realized my myoclonus dystonia had disappeared. And it was like when about a year later, I realized, oh my gosh, maybe this experience cured me. I heard of other NDEs at this point. I had joined IANS, the International Association for Near Death Studies, and heard about other miraculous cures, like Anita Morjani with stage 4 cancer, and Dr. Mary O'Neill, who died underwater for 30 minutes kayaking with a broken everything, basically. Um, and Dr. Eben Alexander, who had some crazy brain infection that killed him, and they came back miraculously cured. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm cured too. And I think around month 18 after my experience, I still wasn't sure that it happened. I was still confused as to what exactly happened. I didn't hear stories that sounded like mine, um, especially with the distressing dark entity part. So I was like, maybe it'll help me to talk about it, on something. And so Jeff Mara invited me to his podcast. And he was still relatively had a relatively small channel at that time. Um,
Well, that's encouraging because
yeah,
because he's blown up.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
He got much bigger, but he was still relatively small at the time, and I hadn't told anyone other than my mom and my sister. I was working corporate America in the marketing profession. Um, for construction, so I didn't want it getting out. I'm like, "Oh, Jeff Mara's safe. He's small."
Yeah. Oh, how
Uh,
funny. Yeah.
so it's
So you
titled,
thought.
yeah, yeah, who would have thought? It's titled my her near death experience cured her incurable neurological disorder. Well, shortly after that, I got headhunted from a beautiful company out of Georgia, USA, and I was ecstatic, and I picked up and moved, and I dove fully back into my old identity. I was working super hard, just trying to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't know any better, so I started having, my old kind of feelings and thoughts. My old identity. I didn't know to have a new one. And I was about to try to find a volunteer opportunity for a hospice in Georgia, and then COVID hit, and the volunteer work disappeared. And that was one thing that really helped me, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, was, helping others going to that place. It was a huge sense of purpose. So that was, kind of short for me, but I'm like, oh, I'm just going to work hard. It's great. I'm an extrovert, and I loved the hopping off office. I got to walk to work until COVID hit, and then we all became isolated, and my beautiful, tiny downtown Atlanta apartment became my prison. And so then I really started to get into my old thoughts, my old feelings, my old actions, and my old identity. And within that, my old condition existed. So myoclonus dystonia reared its evil or ugly head and came back, and it came back with a vengeance.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's that's really interesting. I don't have dystonia, I have dysphonia.
Okay.
And it's so interesting how, and mine isn't a disease, it's a neurological, it's a brain thing, it's a stress disorder, and it's why I lost my voice for a while. But it's interesting that once I got on track with my soul's purpose, it went away. And then when I start to lose my soul's purpose, it comes back. And it's so interesting in terms of like the Louise Hay, um, how your spiritual maladies often become your physical maladies. And I'm not saying everyone who has cancer or everyone that could just be their soul's purpose. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. But even Anita Morjani in her book Dying to Be Me talks about that she had her near death experience. She had cancer all over her body. They told her she was going to die, and then she realized all of her conditioning and low self-esteem, and her culture had made her feel small and like women don't matter and that she was invisible, and it was all self-esteem. And then when she came out of her near-death experience, her tumors were gone, which is sounds unbelievable, but there are doctors to back it up. And now she's thriving and doing really well. And so there is something really to that. Again, not blaming anyone for their maladies, but there's some real component of spirituality there. Do you have any thoughts other than what you said on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Especially, going through a lifetime of chronic illness. I really do think that, we can put these conditions in our paths if we're not following our spiritual path. Um, and it's, interesting. You have a podcast, and you have
Yep.
how do you say it again? Um,
Dysphonia,
dysphonia.
muscle
Dysphonia.
tension dysphonia.
Yeah, and you lost your voice,
Hmm.
but, this is, and as a psychic medium, you use your
Yep.
voice, and you
Yep.
hear from that, and, it goes away because it's like, well, you don't need your purpose, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Um, mine was a movement disorder, so I'm still trying to dissect, how that was trying to, wake me up and put me in a path. But I recently had, last fall, I was studying to get my real estate license because I had tried, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I left corporate America about a year before that. I had become a death doula, but I wasn't super active in it, and I just wanted to, try different things to see what resonated. And a few weeks before I took my exam, community members were telling me, some things like, anyway, so I was getting red flags. And then the day before, I signed up to go take my test in person. It's an hour drive one way. It's up to a 4-hour test. I threw out my back. And back injuries are usually the universe trying to, push you out of the way of where your path. And I knew that was a huge sign that I was not going the right way. So I dropped that. I did take the test, but then I was like, I'm just going to take it because I've already paid for it. I want to see how I do. I studied, and then I'll move on. So,
Right.
and as soon as I decided that, my back pain, let up within a couple days, and it was absolutely a sign. So I think these injuries and these illnesses are definitely manifestations of your soul trying to get you to learn a lesson and trying to get you to listen. So,
Yeah. I also
I've
had SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is what caused me to lose my voice, which is what caused muscle tension because I had vocal cord dysfunction from reflux. And as soon as I got out of the relationship that wasn't right for me, and it's no offense to him, it's just we were not in alignment. And yeah, and getting on the spiritual path, starting to do mediumship, and then was able to get back to voiceover. But first I had to complete soul mission and become aware of spirituality. And now I still have SIBO, but it's well under control. But it took 3 or 4 years, and that coincided with all of these changes that needed to take place before I was going to be given my voice back.
Well, and after my near death experience and my initial cure, because I strongly believe I was cured, myoclonus dystonia just doesn't disappear for 2 years.
Yeah, how
Uh,
does it how what causes it?
so it's classified as a genetic disorder.
Yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
what happens in the brain is your axons aren't long enough to carry a signal from point A to point B. And because it's so short, it causes muscle rigidity, tremors, and that pathway it's stuck. But then myoclonus comes and says, screw it, we're going anyway. And it doesn't know where to go. And that's your involuntary muscle movement. And I think a lot of the psychological issues that come with it, like anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
OCD, ruminating, all of that is because myoclonus is just like, we're so wired. um, the myoclonic dystonic brain on scans, a normal brain maybe has a quarter size of glucose being consumed, where the whole myoclonus dystonia brain is all glucose. Like the whole thing's consuming glucose. It's just overactive and crazy, and they're surprised that the patients aren't having seizures when they're looking at these brains because it's just so overactive. Um,
So
so
ostensibly there'd be no cure for that because it has to do with the length of your what are they called?
axons.
Axons. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so it's classified as an incurable movement disorder or incurable neurological movement disorder.
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of great treatments. We had tried them all, but in my new state of survival, I was in survival for gosh, 22 years. My new state of survival, COVID shut down the world. My myoclonus dystonia has gotten worse. I'm getting more diagnoses with other illnesses, and just the world is falling apart around me again. So I make the hard decision to move back to Colorado, and I try to go back to my old job, and I'm trying to start a good relationship. My relationship was awful. My job fell apart. I fell apart. I fell apart, and then my job fell apart because I fell apart. And then I did finally get into a good relationship, but I didn't have one that great with myself. I was still struggling, like, why did all this happen to me? Why did I have this near death experience? Why did I get this great job to lose it? Just why? Why did myoclonus dystonia disappear just to come back? And I began losing my independence. My tremors were so bad I couldn't text or type, which was most of my job. I couldn't navigate stairs. I couldn't walk. I could hardly drive anymore. My twitching was so bad. I was breaking glasses all the time. Couldn't do my makeup. Couldn't put on earrings. Couldn't button my clothes. And, I wasn't quite hopeless like I was during, around my near death experience, but I was trying really hard to stay positive, and it was getting harder and harder. Um, my mom, of course, there's a pattern. She never gave up, and she joined some Facebook support groups. Never in a million years would I have thought that social media would have helped save my life, but at this point, it was a life-saving surgery. My mom found a girl or a woman, lady around my age, going through her second surgery for this condition, myoclonus dystonia. Reached out to her. She said, "Send me some videos." So she did, and she showed her neurologist during her appointment. And
Oh,
her neurologist was a pediatric neurologist, but he saw the videos and got special permission to see me. And he was in another state, and
oh, wow.
I flew down to see him. And I had years of misdiagnoses and just it's in your head, you're crazy. And that stopped after I finally had a diagnosis at 18, but I still had a lot of medical PTSD. So I said, I'm going without expectation. I'm not going hopeful, and I'm not going expecting he's going to say it's all in my head either. I'm just going to go as a blank slate. And it was wonderful. He spent the whole time with me. He was early, and he said, "Why has no one ever suggested deep brain stimulation surgery for you?" I said, "Well, we knew about it, but no doctor was willing to do it because it was so experimental." He said, "I am." And
Oh,
I was fast tracked to brain surgery just over 2 years ago this month. And it was pretty successful. It really, they weren't even that hopeful. They're like, I'll probably get
mm,
60% improvement on the dystonia. Not really sure about the myoclonus. It's really unknown, unresearched. And our other patients, it's really hit and miss. So I was just like, gosh, if I could just regain
yeah.
some pain relief, honestly, that's great. So never having a major surgery, going to brain surgery, awake
Yeah,
brain
that's a big
surgery.
one.
Yeah, awake brain surgery. I they shaved my head and everything. So the real deal came out pretty successful. They did warn me that myoclonus dystonia is quite cunning and will usually learn ways around the pathways that the system creates. So just keep that in mind. So
Mhm.
I do pretty well for a year. A year later, it's just I'm going downhill, and I'm going downhill fast. My start having more non-epileptic myoclonic seizures. I'm having way more pain in my back again, and more anxiety, and realize I need to fly down and get a programming. So there's a little computer chip in my chest and it's a battery that sends electricity to the deep parts of my brain. So I fly down, and we needed to add more electricity to my brain. And it was, quite intense, um, extra programming session, and it helped. But I kind of figured, since I finally had a team of medical professionals I could trust that they would take care of my physical body, I needed to really take care of my emotional and spiritual body. So I started looking into different types of meditations and programs and techniques, and found out about a meditation retreat from Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I had never known of, well, I guess I knew of meditations where you leave your body, kind of, you get out of your 3D senses, but I'd only been taught about mindfulness meditations where you're fully in the present in the 3D. Um, and that was only temporary, successful for me. So I was really excited to learn about this new type of meditation. And looking back, I had done a ton of shadow work throughout my life. So I had worked on the hurt parts of me and trying to always remain optimistic and hopeful and grateful. And I just had a life with that. I never, as depressing as I made the story sound, which it is, it's a rough story. I always tried to find the silver lining. I adapted when I lost my ability to draw. I switched to photography. When I left photography, I switched to painting. I'm not a fine artist, but I have fun, whimsical paintings. Um, when I lost my ability to walk, I'd figure things out with that. I was just always adapting and really built resilience. I had some traumas and abuses in my past that I also, worked on cutting out. I did EMDR and hypnosis for those traumas. And so throughout my whole life, I've really done a ton of shadow work, which goes into how I spontaneously healed from myoclonus dystonia again. It wasn't spontaneous, it was a life of learning and experimenting and shadow work, but it felt spontaneous. So I'm in a meditation and I am back into what is reminiscent of the void, where I'm with God and creation and full energy, and what some spiritualists call the quantum, the friendly darkness. Million names for it, all the same thing. And I'm back there. And I see my heart and my brain beating as one and talking and communicating. And it's beautiful. And then apart from my near death experience tunnel comes and that code starts circulating. It's coming in through my eighth energy center, going straight to my heart, getting washed in love and gratitude, sending up to my brain. And I'm just witnessing all of this. And I realize, oh my gosh, this is rewriting my brain again and curing me of myoclonus dystonia. And it was absolutely just beautiful. And once again, in my experience, I wasn't really questioning it. The logical brain isn't in here, and it's just like, wow, this is amazing. And then at some point in the meditation retreat, Dr. Joe talks about some Parkinson's patients. So myoclonus dystonia is comparable to Parkinson's. The deep brain stimulator I had put in was originally for Parkinson's patients. So he talks about these people with Parkinson's that are tremoring just so bad, and after these retreats, they stop tremoring, but they go back to their old ways, their old thoughts, their old actions, their old identities, and they start to tremor again. And it blew like my world blew open. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't have this language to get back to the place. I didn't have the knowledge to change my identity. I didn't know the universe was telling me to change paths and create my future. I just didn't have that language. So it came back. And that was really important in my work as a spiritual doula, helping others break free from chronic illness that I do now, is really providing that education and that um, the how to. It was a spontaneous healing, but it wasn't spontaneous all, because looking back in the last 22 years, all the research, all the shadow work, all the spiritual work I ended up you later finding out how to do, you don't need a near death experience to do any of it at all. You could do it much easier, much simpler, much softer. And so it was just a great retreat. So the fun part is I turned it off the stimulator the next day. And usually I could tell change within a minute or two of just a small electricity change.
Mhm.
So I never shut it off before. I had a controller, have a controller that I can manipulate the settings as I need more electricity or adjust where it's at and stuff like that. Um, but I had never gone extreme. But I just knew that I was cured again. And that's why it had to come back so I could learn about all of this. And I shut it off and then I wait and then nothing happens. And then seconds turn into minutes, turn into hours, turn into days to weeks to months. And I know that with my new identity, my new healthy identity, the myoclonus dystonia no longer exists. However, if I go back to my old identity, I know I
Yeah.
could easily recreate the situation. But the timing of it is so divine, because the only doctor within, gosh, I don't even know what other doctors, I think maybe in Florida and New York are the only other doctors in the US who program specifically for myoclonus dystonia. My doctor suddenly left practice 2 months later.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, you just look at all the divine timing, the paranormal spiritual activity to awaken my eyes, and then my near death experience to awaken my soul. And
That's
then
so cool.
the coming back of the illness to awaken my brain, and then, just how everything was so divinely set to happen when it should happen and how it should happen and why it should happen. But during it, you're like, this is crazy. This is chaos. This is hell. I don't understand what this could possibly be for.
Yeah, as you said that, I just got like, I don't know who it was or what spirit just came in, but something like really powerful just happened when you were explaining that. I felt like spirit in my like coming all the way down my body because it's so profound what you just said that and now I'm like, you know what? I'm eventually going to work with you because I get chronic migraines and hormonal and now I'm doing like hormone replacement and it's helping, but I still that's just been like the bane of my existence. So it's I just had that sort of thought of, there is something that you can do that's not traditional. And I think more and more doctors are starting to open their minds to these less traditional treatments. They're even using Reiki in some hospitals. And I just love the idea of that, I mean, that's just so profound. Like what you and I always think of it too. Like I still have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If I eat sugar, like I'll have it again. But the fact is, it was so severe. And the fact, and like as soon as everything sort of, I got into my flow and in my zone, it went away. And it's like all of these little, I had so many chronic illnesses. I had like adrenal exhaustion so bad. And again, that heals over time anyway. But all of these chronic things, they're nothing for me, they're nothing life threatening, but they're life altering.
Mhm.
And what you're doing can change so many people's lives because when I had acid reflux, it was so bad that I had to sleep sitting up because the acid would go into my sinuses, I mean, my sinuses, not my eyes, but it felt like
Yeah.
it was in my eyes. And people who don't have it are like, it's just reflux. No, it's not just reflux. It causes swelling in your esophagus. I couldn't swallow water, swelling in my esophagus so bad that I couldn't even get water down. And that can actually lead to cancerous cells. So I think it's so inspiring to hear your story because if you have a brain disorder that is incurable because of the shape of your axons and you can find relief from that, that's I mean, just what does that say for like what we're capable of as energetic beings, not just human?
Yeah.
And also what you said earlier, and I'd like you to speak to that too, about the snowman imagery. Your imagery was just, I think to me, it struck me as spirit showing you, just think of something and we'll make it real. I'd love to know how that translates to our lives here as well. If you have thoughts on that in terms of what some people might call manifestation, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I always ask that because it's really interesting to me. Like, how much power do we have to
Mhm.
create our reality, and how much of it is like we can't really change?
Oh, we have all the power to create our reality.
Yeah,
And there were so many instances. That was just one example, but I think there were probably 5 or 6 examples of how fast thought can create. Luckily, here we actually have time. So, because we have tons of crazy thoughts that we don't want to happen right away, where it did in my experience. So, I'm actually grateful that there is some time between what happens with our thoughts and the creation. Um, but we can absolutely create our realities. And a lot of people are like, well, why can't we do it instantly? Well,
yeah,
you think about, the spiritual realm and this void of infinite potentials, infinite possibilities. It's way out here. It's on a higher frequency, and matter is just frequency slowed down. And so we're energy bodies, so we're just slowed energy. Our visible universe is slowed down energy. Earth is slowed down energy to matter. So you have to find that possibility first, right? You have to believe it exists. You have to know it exists. You have to find it, and then emotions are basically our magnets. That's what draws our reality to us in our physical realm. So our thoughts are, out here in the spiritual realm, in consciousness, and whatever you want to call it. But our feelings are really centered in our heart center, our heart chakra. And when we feel those emotions, and I'll give you two examples, one of love and gratitude, that's a strong, powerful emotion. So you love that possibility as if it's already happened. And it just helps it create faster and that possibility reach you faster. The same thing happens with these low elevated emotions. If you are fearful of something happening, so an instance that I um, talk about is for abuse victims who get in cycles of abuse, not because they're not worthy, not because they want to, not because they have horrible skills and radar. It's because these patterns, they are usually so fearful of it happening again. That fear and anger is such a powerful emotion. It recreates it, and it pulls that reality from the universe. So there's that possibility out there. You have that thought, and that fear and that anger are so powerful that also creates your reality.
That makes so much sense. I know, and it's hard because our human brains want to protect ourselves, so it can create loops like PTSD, OCD, and even just anxiety. Because
Yeah.
once it happens one time, we're like, we got to be on alert. We got to be in danger mode. And it's really can be very difficult to deprogram ourselves,
Mhm.
to choose a new thought, choose a new thought, choose a new thought. And, but I know that it over time, the power of the mind is so strong that you can. And I know harder for some people who have PTSD. I'm not trying to minimize that, but I always have to
Yeah.
create a disclaimer. But yes, I do see that in my own life as well. So I love that you validated that. And yeah, I would love to know too. I know that you're still doing the death doula work now,
Mhm.
but you're kind of transitioning more into the spiritual doula stuff. Um, what has been sort of the most profound thing about, and a death doula is sort of helping someone, and I'd love to hear your description of it, but it's helping someone, supporting them as they know they're transitioning, which can be really scary. And I would love to know, what is it that how do you describe that, what you do for them? And how has that, what have you learned, or what are some profound insights that you've gained from doing that?
Yeah, so when I started as a death doula, I really thought I would be working with more people who are actively dying and just holding space for them. I was very excited to do that, and I love that about hospice. So I was really excited to bring that to the table as a death doula. However, I've only been called to two bedsides in the last year. I live in a small town, so that's part of it. We have great hospice care, so that's another part. People don't know what a death doula does or is, so that's a huge part. But what I found is working with the clients I did have. I mean, young people who are just trying to get their advanced directives down to remain autonomous over their body in case of an accident or illness, um, helping them communicate their wishes and their desires with themselves and their loved ones, and older people who are just trying to make life's amends, and just try to figure out what they actually believe and what relationships are worth repairing. What is important to do before they transition out of this life. So I was recently a part of a bucket list trip. I was asked.
I know. I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, so that was by far the most profound experience. I am just so honored that not only did I get to help somebody plan this bucket list item and how to achieve it, but I was so trusted that I was asked to be a companion on this trip. Um, so I got to meet, and I've been working with her for a year, and I got to meet her family who already knew about me because she said, "This gal's helping me with my end of life decisions." And of course, they're probably like, "Who's helping my 90-year-old mother with these decisions?" So
Yeah.
it was such a honorable experience, and my heart is so full of gratitude. But um, throughout working with everybody, I found I really have this innate skill to be a non-judgmental, non-biased reflection. So people can, talk with me, and I don't have to say much. They open up their own world of identity, and they birth into their authentic selves. And whether that's young people just trying to explore what death death is and death and dying is like to these people who are getting closer to dying and trying to figure out, just what is important at the end when they know, there's limited time left. So I found I have this innate skill for this and found out that that translates really well into becoming a spiritual doula, as well as helping other people unlock their own divine keys of healing. That goes into I can help you reflect on what your soul is trying to yell at you, what your lessons are, how to break soul contracts, how to change your thoughts, your identity, your actions, your feelings into a healthier version of yourself. So it all kind of encompasses into what I've been doing since I was able to, even before I even heal myself, is just holding this space and helping people unlock their own keys of healing. That's all I do is I have a mirror and they've just going in looking like in Harry once again Harry Potter. I guess I really like that movie. He sees the mirror and he finds out the stones in his pocket. So I'm just that mirror showing you how to unlock your own keys to healing.
That was gonna be my next question, and you answered it beautifully. I I love this interview so much, and I'm so grateful that you chose to join me today and to share your story with my audience. There will be a link below to your services. And is there anything else you have coming up that you want to share other than what you're doing? Do you have any events or books or writings, anything you want to share? Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, my third book, um, Leads to Nowhere: Healing with Encounters Through the Quantum, is actually going to be released very soon.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, that's so cool. Well, thank you, Brie Lafferty, for joining me today. This has been such a wonderful experience, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you, Shannon.